Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We'll continue our reading from chapter 20 of Brilliant as the Sun, retelling of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam Canto 9, Celestial Dynasties. Mukam Kauti Vachalam Pangum Langate Girim Yat Kripatamam Vande Shri Gurum Deen Tarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hariyam Tatsat. Chapter 20 is Dushmanta and Shakuntala. Shukadev said, My dear King Parikshit, I will now describe King Puru's dynasty in which you were born. Many other saintly kings appeared in this dynasty, and many Brahmin dynasties originated from it. The sage named 4 generations of Puru's descendants. When he reached the 15th, King Dushmanta said, Hear from me about the birth of Dushmanta's son. Dushmanta and his men plunged deeply into the jungle in that wild and uninhabited region. They fearlessly faced herds of wild elephants, rhinoceros, and wild buffaloes, and many species of big cats. On the 4th day, as Dushmanta led his men deeper into the jungles, a pack of ferocious lions leapt on his steed, piercing its hide with their sharp claws and tearing its flanks with their teeth. As his mount faltered and fell to his knees, Dushmanta clasped his heavy iron mace and leapt to the ground. He whirled it skillfully in fierce close combat, smashing the lions' heads and powerful blows. When the pack's leaders were slain, the other lions turned and fled. Dushmanta ran to his steed, lying wounded and exhausted on the ground. He called to his men, Light a fire and set up camp here. He selected 2 men to accompany him and set off on foot to find the river. As they pushed through the thickets, they came across a remote hermitage wherein they saw a beautiful woman. The 3 men lowered their weapons. Attracted by the girl, Dushmanta, suddenly freed of his fatigue by the sight of her, called out jovially, Beautiful lady, who are you? Who is your father, and what are you doing in this remote place? She looked up and, feeling startled, did not immediately reply. Dushmanta told his companions to stay put while he approached closer. O beautiful lotus-eyed lady, you have nothing to fear. I am King Dushmanta of the Puru dynasty. Since my mind never endeavors to enjoy anything irreligiously, I think you must also be the daughter of a king. The girl replied, O hero, I never knew my parents who abandoned me in this forest. However, the powerful sage Kanva tells me I am the daughter of Vishwamitra and Menaka. Now please tell me how I may serve you. She pulled out a straw mat and placed it before Dushmanta. Kindly sit and accept our hospitality. I have cooked some wild rice with which to satisfy your hunger. You may stay and rest here for as long as you wish. Overcome by desires, Dushmanta smiled and said, Since you are born of royalty, most beautiful one, it is quite befitting that you marry royalty. O lady of charming smiles, marry me. Sage Kanva has been just like a father to me. He must decide. He took her hand and looked into her eyes. Surely he has told you that kings' daughters generally select their husbands. When Shakuntala neither objected nor pulled away, Dushmanta placed the garland around his neck over her head while chanting Om. Now we are married according to the Gandharva rite. Telling his men to return to the rest of the party, Dushmanta spent the night with the Shakuntala. The next day he returned to his kingdom, and Shakuntala remained in Sage Kanva's ashram, where she gave birth to Dushmanta's son. The sage performed all the necessary rituals for the newborn child, who grew up strong and fearless, so much so that he would capture and play with lions. Noting the boy's incredible strength, Kanva realized he was partial incarnation of Vishnu and encouraged Shakuntala to take him to his father. When Shakuntala arrived at Dushmanta's court, she announced herself as his wife and presented the boy as his son. Dushmanta, frightened of popular opinion, rejected her and the boy, even though he knew she spoke the truth. You suddenly appear here with this boy saying he is my son. Who could believe such a claim? When Shakuntala realized it was useless trying to reason with Dushmanta, she took her son by the hand and returned to leave, but suddenly a voice was heard booming from the heavens. Shakuntala has spoken the truth. A son saves his father from Yamraj's custody. This boy was conceived by your semen and is thus your son. Therefore maintain him and do not insult Shakuntala. Shakuntala continued, when King Dushmanta passed away, his son became the emperor of the world, consisting of 7 islands. He is widely accepted as a partial incarnation of Vishnu. Parikshit said, what is his name and why do people think he is an incarnation of Vishnu? His name is King Bharat. His right palm bore the mark of Krishna's disc and the soles of his feet with the shape of a lotus whirl. When he became the emperor and master of the world, he performed many grand ritualistic ceremonies to worship Vishnu. Please tell me about the sacrifices he performed, said Parikshit. He appointed Bhrigu Muni as his chief priest. With his help, he performed 55 horse sacrifices on the banks of the Ganges, beginning at its mouth and ending at its source. He then similarly performed another 78 horse sacrifice on the banks of the Yamuna, beginning at Prayag, and each sacrifice was performed at an ideal location, and at the end of each he distributed 13,084 cows to each of the thousands of Brahmins who attended. He used 3,300 horses for those sacrifices. All the world's kings were astonished by his opulence, which surpassed that of the gods. In the end, he attained the audience of the Supreme Lord. One time he performed a sacrifice in a place called Mashnara, at the end of which he distributed 1,400,000 excellent elephants completely covered in golden ornaments. Parikshit gasped, I have never heard of such opulence. Shukadev nodded. Just as it's impossible to touch heaven by reaching up with one's hand, similarly, it is impossible for anyone to imitate the wonderful pastimes of King Bharat. No one in the past has ever equaled him, nor shall anyone in the future do so. Please tell me more about him. After becoming the emperor, he went on tour and defeated all the kings opposed to the spiritual culture. On another occasion, he heard that the demons had defeated the gods and taken their women to Rasatal in the lower planetary region of the universe. Bharat rescued all those women and returned them to the gods. Throughout the 27,000 years of his reign, he provided all necessities for his subjects on earth and in the heavenly planets. His armies were stationed throughout the universe and his edicts were obeyed everywhere. Despite being undisputed ruler of the universe and seeming very attached to his sons and family, he eventually considered all this an impediment to his spiritual advancement and renounced everything. Please tell me about his sons. Bharat married Vidarbha's 3 daughters who were all extremely beautiful. When they all gave birth, Bharat told his chief minister that the children did not look like him. When his comment reached his queens, they feared he would reject them on suspicion of adultery. In panic, each of them smothered their son. Bharat then performed a sacrifice to the Maruts, petitioning them for a son, and they delivered him a boy named Bharadwaj. Parikshit said, that's a strange name to give a child. It means illegitimate burden. Doesn't it? Yes, that is how the boy was referred to by his birth parents. Why? He was conceived when Brihaspati raped his sister-in-law Mamata. She was pregnant with her husband's child, and her unborn child protested loudly for Brihaspati to stop. Being too lusty, Brihaspati cursed the unborn child to become blind and continued to rape Mamata forcefully. The unborn child kicked Brihaspati's semen out with his heel. Falling to the ground, it immediately formed into a child. Mamata, fearing rejection by her husband Uttaya wanted nothing to do with the boy. The gods tried to solve the problem by saying that since the boy's illegitimate birth made him a burden to either of his parents, Brihaspati and Mamata should conjointly take responsibility for him. That's how he got the name, meaning illegitimate burden. Then why was he given away to Bharat? Because despite the god's suggestion, both parents refused to take responsibility. They each insisted the other to take the boy, then walked away, abandoning the child. The gods tried several times to convince Mamata to look after her son, but she wanted nothing to do with him. Consequently, the Maruts took care of the boy and later gave him to King Bharat. So with that, we come to end of this chapter, chapter 20, Dushmanta and Shakuntala. And now let's read from chapter 21, King Rantideva. Shukadev continued, after the Maruts delivered him to King Bharat, Bharadwaj became known as Vittatha. Shukadev named his son and 5 grandsons, the second youngest of whom was Nara. Nara had also 2 grandsons, one of whom was the highly virtuous King Rantideva. This great soul is famous in both this world and heavens. Shukadev said, for he is glorified in human society and among the gods. Listen to how he earned his fame. King Rantideva stood on his balcony surveying the endless queues. Scrawny men, women and children waited patiently to be served a small portion of Krishna's prasadam and fill their vessels with drinking water. He looked up at the clear skies. The drought of his kingdom had lasted years. Rivers and lakes had dried up, crops were destroyed, and the granaries were virtually empty. The king felt a tender hand on his arm and turned to see his wife. She was emaciated and trembled with weakness. Like him, she had not eaten for 48 days. He gave out small portions of food grains to each citizen every second day. But he could not bear to eat or drink himself when he saw others in need. For this reason, his wife also refused to eat and drink. My dear husband, please reconsider performing a sacrifice to propitiate Lord Indra. If he is satisfied, he will pour down the rains and put an end to this terrible drought and famine. Rantideva gently shook his head. My beloved queen, most chaste lady, it is my strong determination never to engage in any gainful sacrifice. Daily I worship Lord Vishnu, the Lord of all lords and the best friend of all living beings. If he so desires, the rain will come and our crops will be bountiful. But if the Lord desires to withhold the rains, he must accept that as his supreme kindness. His queen nodded weakly and collapsed in a faint. He called for the royal Brahmin physicians, who told him she would surely die if she did not eat soon. Rantideva immediately asked that a meal be prepared for her. Gently reviving her, he asked her to eat and drink to restore her life. My lord, how can a wife agree to eat or drink until her husband does so? Seeing his wife's determination, Rantideva agreed to eat. The servants brought him a plate of food and goblet of water. After glorifying Lord Vishnu, he was about to break his long fast when a Brahmin guest arrived. After bowing before the king, he said, O king, your men have finished distributing food supplies for today. I remain unfed and suffering. Please give me relief. Rantideva looked compassionately at the withered Brahmin. Surely the Lord had guided him to the palace. He stood up and respectfully invited the Brahmin to sit with him, calling for another plate. Rantideva divided his food equally with the Brahmin and asked him to eat. When his guest was satisfied and had departed, Rantideva divided what was left between his wife and himself and sent a portion to her with the instruction that she should now eat. Then he heard a loud commotion from outside as he was about to eat what remained. What's going on? He asked the minister. A Shudra is struggling to get past the guards. Let him in, commanded Rantideva. My citizens are as dear to me as my children. Never deny them access to their king. The gaunt-faced Shudra stumbled in and fell on his knees before Rantideva. My lord, your men have no more food or water to distribute today. I have not eaten for days. If I do not eat, I shall surely die. Seeing the supersoul in the man's heart, Rantideva cheerfully called for an empty plate. He placed half of his food on the empty one and bade the man to sit and eat. Observing the rules of hospitality, he waited until his guest had finished eating and departed. Then he sat to eat what remained. He first offered a short prayer of gratitude to Vishnu before eating. Just as he finished his prayers, he heard dogs barking. After being reprimanded for denying someone access to their king, the guards had allowed a hunter with his pack of dogs into the chamber. The hunter fell on his knees before the king. Lord, my company of dogs and I are starving. Please give us food. Without hesitation, Rantideva respectfully invited the hunter to sit and place his plate before him. The hunter shared the food with his dogs, and when they had eaten, the hunter thanked the king and departed. Only the goblet of water remained. He raised it to his lips, but an outcast entered the chamber before he could take even a sip. He fell to his knees with tear-filled eyes. "O king, kindly show me mercy and give me some drinking water, otherwise I shall die of thirst." Hearing these pitiable words, Rantidev's heart became overwhelmed with compassion. He held out his goblet, fearing for the king's life. His chief minister whispered, "My king, my lord, there is not even a drop of water left in the palace. I fear that unless you drink this, you will not survive." Rantidev said, "What value is our life if we cannot alleviate the suffering of others? I do not desire anything for myself. I only want to stay among the living entities and suffer all distresses on their behalf, so they may be freed from the suffering. By offering my water to maintain this poor man's life, I have been freed from all hunger, thirst, fatigue, bodily trembling, distress, lamentation, and illusion." Although on the verge of death, Rantidev handed the goblet of water to the outcast. As he did so, the man suddenly disappeared, and the effulgent gods, headed by Brahma and Shiva, stood in his place. Smiling at Rantidev, the gods raised their hands in benediction. Brahma spoke on their behalf. "High soul Rantidev, we are greatly pleased with you. We arranged this terrible famine and drought to test your piety. We also came in the guise of all your guests to further test your selfless charity and adherence to virtue. We are most satisfied with your kind-heartedness and material detachment. Therefore, you may ask us any boon you desire." Rantidev knelt before him. "O lords of the universe, I offer you my repeated obeisance. I have no desire for any material enjoyment. If you are satisfied with me, pray grant that I may always be fixed in Lord Vishnu's devotional service with my body, mind, and words." Shukadev said, due to Rantidev's continual remembrance of Krishna without any material motives, the Lord's illusory energy Maya vanquished like a dream. Unable to remain before him, Rantidev's citizens followed his example. They never sought material profit from the gods, but kept their minds fixed on serving Lord Narayan. Thus, by his association, they too became the best of yogis. Deeply touched by Rantidev's story, Parikshit joined in the spontaneous chant that rippled through the assembly. "All glories to King Rantidev, all glories to Lord Narayan." When the assembly again became quiet, Shukadev continued his narration. He listed the descendants of Bharadwaja's eldest grandson, Brihatkshatra. His son was Hasti, who founded the city of Hastinapur. Hasti had 3 sons, Ajamidha, Dvimidha, and Purumidha. Shukadev first traced 12 generations descending from Ajamidha's son, Adishu, and 14 generations from Hasti's second son, Dvimidha, among whom was Kirti, who attained mystic powers from Lord Brahma. Next, he listed 11 generations descending from another Jamidha's son, Nila. One of his descendants created the Panchal kingdom, others became Brahmins. One amongst these Brahmins descended Father Ahalya, who married Gautam. Among the descendants was Shardavan, who discharged semen into a clump of grass on seeing Urvashi. 2 auspicious babies, one male and one female, were born from this. They were found by King Shantanu when he was on a hunting excursion. Taking compassion on the infants, he took them home. The male he named Kripa and the female he named Kripi. Kripi later married Drona. So this brings us to the end of the chapter, King Rantidev, which was chapter number 21. Thank you for joining. Hare Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.